success, be nobleness, and ever again divine.
Hey, thank you for joining. And it's actually the eve of election, and I can't believe we've done probably over 20 of these podcasts, doing through even maybe probably more. And every single time we've done these things, it just gets better and better. And today I'm with two special guests, but we're going to talk about politics at the local level. And a lot of people really don't understand how much politics at the local level affects your everyday life. Now, some wonderful guests here that had experienced this firsthand on different levels. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off. First, I'm going to introduce Steve Friend. Let me get his bio up. His bio is phenomenal. Former FBI agent, and then before that, police officer, many years as a police officer. So a lifelong journey in serving his community, serving the police force, and serving our nation. And I know he has a very interesting story. A lot of people have heard about it, and I'll leave that up to him when we pass it off. And we also have our friend of the campaign and friend of the show, Jeff Hoffman, has dealt with some political backlash in this sense that he's gone through, and obviously myself going through this current campaign and dealing with a lot of the negativity and the underhandedness. But we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Let me pass it over to Steve. Steve, welcome on board. And go ahead and give a little bit about your background, some more depth in there, and then kind of what happened to you and how this type of a podcast really affected you.
Well, thanks for having me today. My name is Steve Friend. I really come from Savannah, Georgia. That's home for me. We moved there when I was a pretty little kid. Grew up there, went to school most of the time. Eventually, after college, decided to become a police officer. Was a police officer in Savannah for a number of years before applying to and ultimately being hired by the FBI. Joined the FBI in 2014. Was sent to Iowa, Northwest Iowa, where I investigated Indian reservation crimes for about 7 years, and then eventually transferred to my current area, which is Daytona Beach, Florida, and took that transfer to work on child pornography in 2021. But within a few months of arriving, was reassigned to work on domestic terrorism, was told that child pornography was not a priority for the FBI going forward. And that was the first access that I had to the January 6th cases. And when I looked at them, it was very apparent to me the FBI was departing from its own rules and using some very aggressive and dangerous tactics to arrest people. So I brought those concerns forward last August, and the FBI facilitated my suspension and removal from duty within 30 days. And at that point, I became a FBI whistleblower.
Nice. And thank you for your service, and thank you for your continued service for our country. I mean, these are hard times, and wherever you stand on the political aisle, somebody that comes forward with grievances that's happening in their workspace, we need to listen to them and not do what we do. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, hey, Steve, again, thank you for your time tonight. And it was nice to meet you. And I also want to put a plug in for your book, True Blue. Is that the correct title, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, True Blue, my journey from beat cop to suspended FBI whistleblower. It's
Right.
It's on sale on Amazon. It's been out since June. Did pretty well, hit #1 in a couple of categories a few times. I had the added benefit of Miranda Devine give me the assist. She wrote the introduction. She was the first member of the media who exposed my name to the public sphere.
Yeah. And I just want to say that that's just real courage. You're a special agent with FBI. And to put the Constitution and American values, especially conservative values, first. That's just really courageous and heroic of you. And my understanding, you're also a senior fellow for the Renewing America? Is that
the Center for Renewing America? It's a think tank,
Yeah.
501c3. It's based in Washington, D.C. Russ
Okay.
is the president. He was the director of the Office of Management and Budget under
Great.
the administration. So we're pushing back on the woke and weaponized government, hoping to at least get a little bit of policy in place before until the White House changes hands to the Republicans.
Yeah, and just to give you a lay of the land, I'm sure you're familiar with Fairfax County, Virginia. We have the elections tomorrow. 12 seats are up just on the school board alone, including Tony's seat, which he's going to replace an incumbent who was first elected in 2019. His name's Carl Frisch. But we see it here. There's been articles, there's been other discussions, especially with our Attorney General. There was a memo, and I'm sure you're familiar of the AG memo that came out and actually made its way to our capital in Virginia that highlighted that parents were actually being investigated. Maybe not necessarily investigated, but at least being observed. And we also have another activist here. She lives in the city of Fairfax, Stacy Langton. She just premiered in the police state, which a lot of people I know have seen it. I've seen it. And she highlights, when this started over 2 years ago, when I brought an exhibit A right here. This is genderqueer. Maybe we'll zoom in on it. That might be pornography. Maybe we shouldn't use that on the show. But because parents are going to these school board meetings during public comments and complaining about these types of books, which we view as pornography in our libraries, and the FBI and DOJ have really been weaponized. And so I'd really like to hear more, maybe some of the cases that you worked on that might have been related to school board, domestic terrorism. But you and Tony, you really have a lot in common as well. You were Secret Service.
Yep.
On J6, you had a security team that actually revealed the pipe bomb at the RNC headquarters. Yeah. So I think this could be a good conversation tonight. But if we could, I'd really just like to start out and just hear more, maybe about your involvement with some of the J6 investigations and anything that you might have been involved with school board and domestic cases.
Yeah, you touched on a few things there
domestic terrorism.
Well, you touched on a few things that actually had some crossover with in my time in the FBI. That memo that came from the National School Board Relations Board or something to that effect. It was essentially a lobbying organization on behalf of school boards that was pushed through to the Attorney General, who then turned the teeth on the Department of Justice, which is the FBI, on parents at school board meetings. And you can say that didn't happen, but I can tell you that it did. I was directed to perform surveillance of school board meetings in my area. Now, it was an effort, in my educated opinion, to marry January 6th and the narrative surrounding that with the school board. The incidents that were happening, I mean, to say incidents is even kind of loaded. It was parents that were unhappy after COVID and seeing the education that their children were being forced to participate in. They were unhappy with the pornographic material being uncovered, and they were going to their school board, as is their right as American citizens, to voice their concerns and their displeasure. But in the case in where my area is, we were directed to surveil an individual who was a January 6th subject when he went to a school board meeting, and in the parking lot to document anyone who he had contact with. And they were trying to build out a network. And I think because the January 6th cases are so politically charged, and this was obviously a pet project to protect the school boards and the teachers unions on behalf of the Attorney General, there was this effort to marry the two because they could then paint parents as domestic terrorists. And that threat tag, and it's a hashtag EDU officials, that there was a memo that the FBI put out. The Deputy Assistant Director, Carlton Peoples, issued it. And it was essentially a sorting mechanism for these complaints that were to come in. The FBI said it did not investigate any parents. That's false. At least 24 parents that we know of. My band of suspended agents, we've been able to compile some information collectively together, and essentially at least 24 parents were investigated by the FBI under that threat tag, and there was no accountability for it. Merrick Garland stood up and said that that didn't happen, and there was no problem with it. But Carlton Peoples was elevated. He's now the special agent in charge of the Birmingham field office in the FBI. And back to the questions about January 6th, I was moved over in October of 2021, so roughly 9 months after the incident. that was my first access to those cases. So really the information that I brought out about that day was right of boom. In national security, you sort of have left of boom and right of boom, left being everything leading up to the incident, the boom being the incident, right being the aftermath. So I had tremendous concerns about the way the cases were being managed because they were creating this false narrative, this false statistic that domestic terrorism is around the country, when in fact it's mostly, if not entirely, derived from opening a separate case for every single person as opposed to having one case, which would be the obvious and normal practice for this incident. And then using a SWAT team in the case was in my area, there was an individual there was a arrest warrant was issued for him, and the FBI decided to use a SWAT team to arrest him. He had pledged to cooperate, and he'd had no contact with us for a year and a half. And I proffered that was an unnecessary risk to his safety, to our safety. I live in Florida, Second Amendment state. If you knock on my door a year and a half after having contacted me, and it's at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're banging out there, I have every expectation that I'm going to come to the door with a firearm in my hand as a husband and a father and a responsible citizen. And I could easily foresee that ending very poorly for that individual or for one of us. So I brought those concerns forward. And then lastly, I'll say the police state movie, I was involved with that. I had the fortunate opportunity to work with Dinesh D'Souza and Dan Bongino, and was a part of the technical advising on that film, as well as I had some moments on screen as well. So it was a fun project, and hopefully it bears fruit as far as sharing the information that we had out there for the American public to get access to.
No, that's some very good info. And when we started looking at this stuff, and my background being military, Secret Service, and CIA, and I actually do know Dan Bongino. I helped him when he was doing advanced work in Afghanistan. A very good guy, and I really respect him and the work he does. But when we start looking at this, we have law enforcement being put in a situation to where they have to make a choice. And obviously, both of us being in this situation where, working for the government, you get in a situation where you have to follow orders or you don't follow orders. And if you don't follow orders, you know what's going to happen, and it's going to come down that way. I mean, I've ran into that kind of stuff in my time, with an agency of certain things that I didn't agree with. So it is a very much a pressure situation for a lot of these law enforcement officers, and to be put in that situation is a disservice to them, especially when they look at it and it's clearly excessive in the sense of where it could cause issues. I'd like to bring up, just like when they did the raid on Mar-a-Lago,
Yeah.
you have Secret Service there. Now you have FBI showing up and police department showing up with long guns. Now you have a blue on blue situation because, and luckily the president of the United States wasn't there, but someone has to make a decision.
Yeah.
Are these legit people coming? Why would you come to an area that has friendlies, rolling in like that? And I think a lot of it comes down to, because I worked with the FBI when I was in the CIA. I worked with local police when I was in the Secret Service. I understand, the relationship we have and the communication. So there shouldn't be anything that's, you're caught off guard. There's communication happening. But when that happens, you run a situation where you're making a decision, and you put in Secret Service in a bad situation. The president was there. You're making a decision saying, okay, are these people actually FBI or not? And what if they use the same tactics, grab a bunch of gear, make it look like FBI,
Right.
come up and do the same type of thing with the expectation that the Secret Service is going to let them on in? You run a situation where you can have some bad stuff happen, and all for a political party to try to gain political points, to make it sensational, to have it out there on the media.
Right.
But at what risk? And we're seeing this time and time again happening, not just what happened with parents being followed and classified as domestic terrorists, which is the most disgusting thing I ever heard. And when I heard about it, I was appalled. But just the simple tactic of utilizing cameras in the middle of, or early morning when they actually are serving a warrant and knocking on it like the person is uh, a like a drug dealer that has that comes from the cartel and you need to protect yourself. When in reality, this is just a regular
It
blue
was a
collar
gotcha.
worker.
Yeah, it was a gotcha raid.
And those type of things, when I start looking at it, it's abuse of power. And
Right.
myself now moving to politics, and seeing the tactics on the local level that they're doing to me with these minor things, which I just found out today, that there was a Sabio for Fairfax.org website created that was having anyone that went to it redirecting them to another
wow.
website that was all full of slanderous things.
Yeah.
Now it's down now, but my inside source told me about this. But these are the tactics, trying to redirect, trying to paint people out to be a certain something that they're not. And I think it's a breakdown of our society. And I like to go back to what George Washington said in his final address. And if you haven't heard it, please go read, go listen to it. His final address, in his cabinet, he had Hamilton and Jefferson, Federalist and a Republican, a Democrat Republican. He wrote in his final address, the downfall of the United States will be political parties.
Mm-hmm.
He said there that allegiance will shift to the party over the country. And we're seeing it right now.
Yeah.
We're at a point in our time where we either have to stand up and bring, the love back to the country and reunite, or we continue this division, which is just going to go down a road that we're all seeing.
Right.
It's just going to get nastier and nastier and nastier. And as a conservative going into politics and winning my election tomorrow, I vow to myself that I will not put politics over my country.
And it is an independent seat.
Yes.
And that's the one most important thing, I think, with the school board, especially in Fairfax County. It's over politicized, and it truly is an independent seat. And I don't, the parties endorse the candidates. Had I decided to go forward, I wasn't going to get the endorsement.
Yeah.
It was truly going to be an independent candidacy.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you have some of your resources that are backed by that endorsement, so you kind of have to do that balance. But across the board, and later on, I'd like to hear, how you're going to fix some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right on the school board. But when you look at some of the things that we could do, especially if we get state senate, and we can actually craft some legislation and change some things with the school board. Right now, all the school board members serve for 4 years.
Yeah.
At the district level, at a minimum, they should serve only 2.
Yeah.
So they don't get too comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's why you see this over politicization of the school board. And frankly, Steve, I think this is why you're seeing the domestic, the labeling, the categorization of domestic terrorism in school board meetings. And you're probably familiar with Loudoun County, Steve, but Scott Smith, he was just protecting his kids. Other parents are only speaking up, saying they want parent rights as part of policy, as part of the mantra within a school board environment. And it's just really sad. So we've had podcasts in the past, and we've been a little more conversational and laughing. This isn't a laughing matter.
No.
But this is, and I want to hear, Tony, day one, November 8th, what are some of your ideas? One, to get the politics out.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned audits in the past, which I think is a phenomenal idea. I definitely like to hear more, on maybe your top 3 priorities.
Well, the top 3 is transparency. We need to be transparent. We got $3.6 billion budget. I mean, it is huge and it's inflated. Transparency, full audit, going all the way down, seeing where every cent is going to, and then figure out what jobs are being doubled up with Fairfax County that we could go ahead and shift out of that. So we don't need to do those, or shift jobs over to the county and talk with the board supervisor, say, hey, you need to absorb this because we need to put this money towards the actual teachers.
Right.
Raise up the teachers' rates, take out the 20 highest positions that they have in Fairfax County, which I don't know if you know this, Steve,
Overinflated.
but our school board superintendent makes $20,000 less than the president of the United States. And so, Paul,
380?
she makes $380 a year.
380 a year.
And with the top 20 making more than sitting congressmen and senators.
Mhm.
So that's going to be reduced to more of a rate that commensurates with the actual job they're doing.
Right.
And then on top of that, this school board has 8 lawyers on staff. 8 lawyers on staff. That is more than O.J. Simpson had. Okay. Why do we need 8 lawyers on staff? So that's got to go. So we're going to free up a lot of money. We're going to shift money towards the teachers, towards the school faculty,
Mhm.
and put the emphasis there. Second to that, with the transparency, we're going to have a true parent advisory group, and it's not going to be selected by the PTAs or anything.
I like that.
What I want to do is more like a lottery system. So each person puts in every district, parents that want to join this, they put their names into it. And just like a lottery system, if your number pops up, you're on. So there's nothing that's tainted for anyone to say, oh, you made it heavy on one side or not. So I want the true essence of what our community is. And I think that's the best way, the easiest way.
That's a good idea.
And then have the same thing with teachers, and not administrators, teachers. So they are going to help build out the curriculum. They're going to help come out with the common sense stuff.
Mhm.
And that's what we do for transparency, because we got to get buy-in.
Well, and giving the teachers a voice.
Oh, definitely giving.
Right now, there's a lot of coercion, I think, with the teachers.
But second to that is to emphasize day one on is to tell every parent that their voice matters. I work for them, and this school board will work for them.
Mhm.
That they are not domestic terrorists. How can you be a domestic terrorist if you're protecting your children? And Steve, tell me, how did a lot of people in the FBI, how did that resonate with them? When you read this memo that comes out and what you guys are, tasked to do, how did it sit with you? I'm sure you're a parent, correct?
Yep, 2 children, and I'd actually attended school board meetings as a private citizen myself before this directive came out. So it was something within my office that my colleagues teased me about. They said, I guess we're going to be investigating you next. And even within my office, look, I was not in a large office, but having conversations with the other guys that I worked with, they know what is going on is wrong. Unfortunately, though, they do not subscribe to the belief that I do, that you have an oath of office to keep, and they view it more as the iPhone user agreement. They just check yes.
Yeah.
So this is real, Steve. You see the police state. You hear a lot of the conversations. You got the Twitter trolls who are far lefties. They call you crazy. They call you MAGA. They call you Trump. But this has nothing to do with that. This is truly a politicized government agency.
It's very politicized, and obviously it favors the left side of the spectrum here greatly as it's choosing its targets for investigation. But that's not 100% either. And look, full disclosure about me, and I wrote about this in the book. I am not a Donald Trump voter. It does not matter to me. It was not a issue of sour grapes or political preference.
Exactly.
You can make any accusation that you want against me as being some sort of political partisan hack. It's just not true on its face. I was worried about the process, as always, as anybody who is a good and professional law enforcement person is. In our culture, we now revere the system disruptor, and that's especially true in technology. But in law enforcement, it is about the system idealist. You want to maintain what we have. That is the Constitution. That is the rule of law. That is the policy and the procedures that guide how you're supposed to do. The wins and loss column do not matter when you're a police officer or an FBI agent or a Secret Service agent or a CIA operative. You have to follow the process, and that is a due process that everyone is afforded. I do not care if you're O.J. Simpson. I don't care if you're Pablo Escobar. I don't care if you're Osama bin Laden. If you're an American citizen and you're accused of a crime, we investigate it the same. We follow the same process. And then if you win a trial or lose a trial, that's up to a jury of your peers. I shouldn't be, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, which is now happening within the FBI. And as we're seeing, it's happening more towards one end of the political spectrum than the other, but it's not universal. Look, I tracked on some of the Antifa riots that were going on, or protests. They weren't actually riots at that point, that were in Colorado Springs a couple of years ago. The FBI infiltrated and tried to entrap individuals into making illegal firearms purchases so they could charge them with a crime. This is a tried and true practice with the federal government, where they find a person and they view them as vulnerable and an opportunity to build a case upon. Not because they're predisposed to committing any sort of violation of rule or law, but because they might be suggestible. And the FBI takes advantage of that fully.
Wow. Well, it goes back to what they said, during the conversation, I think, when they said, find me a person and I'll find something on them or something like that. I don't know, paraphrasing, but when we start looking at the weaponization of law enforcement, weaponization of positions, and we're putting, we're using them as political pawns to go do bidding. I mean, these are real men and women in FBI that some of them can't do what Steve did because of financial reasons.
Right.
And it's a fear.
Yeah.
Because of fear of losing their job, losing their pension, losing everything.
That's the goal of cancel culture.
And exactly. And they know this. And to put FBI, police departments, the everyday men and women that wear that badge, to swear the oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and to put them in a situation where they have to choose whether I'm going to follow this order or lose my job.
Right.
It's hard. That's hard. It's a disservice.
It's the same with COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of people with the vaccine, they weren't necessarily comfortable with the science. Things were pushed on people. I got the vaccine. I was in England at the time.
Yeah.
Some people didn't get the vaccine, especially in the military. People got kicked out. People got canceled.
A lot of good guys I know in special operations decided just to get kicked out.
Right.
And you're seeing, one good thing that we're seeing.
And we've had issues beyond COVID, which is SARS, by the way.
Yeah.
Anthrax. Right.
Yeah.
There was never an all-out, hey, everybody go to the local CVS or Duane Reade and get your anthrax shot.
Yep.
So there's a precedent for the science.
Yeah. No, definitely. But I think we're seeing more and more law enforcement, more and more veterans stepping up and actually joining in the fight.
Yeah.
And especially in the local level. And a person like Steve, that decided that his integrity of who he is and his oath means more than anything else. I mean, Steve, you're just one example of many people that I'm talking with that is making that decision to look at their country and say, if I don't fight this, if I don't step up, then there will not be a country for me to love, to serve.
Right.
And we're seeing that through and through. And I always like to toss this positive, because there's a lot of positive we're doing, and we're seeing this. But also, we definitely have to rally. The one thing that the left is very good at is rallying their base. And regardless of whatever talking points they want to say, their base spews it out. And for example, right now you see a lot of demonstrations across the world in the United States with the Palestinian movement and pretty much supporting the terrorist group Hamas and what they did and their atrocity they did. And I tell that, not many people here in Virginia has stood up and said that they denounced the atrocities. I think I am the only school board candidate and anyone running in the school board actually came out and firmly and said, I denounce this 1,000%. But we're seeing, because they want to push movement, people on the left that are going to these things and they support, LGBTQ, they support all these things that community does not support.
Well, they're trying to absorb all these different movements,
but they don't
bring them under the one umbrella. And that's why you saw the change. And this show isn't about LGBTQ, but that's why you saw the change.
Yeah.
In the flag.
Yeah.
Like you had Black Lives Matter. You had other movements that were absorbed
Yeah.
into that left wing, and this is another one of those with
Yeah.
the Hamas and supporting Hamas. I can't even believe how there's a difference between supporting Hamas and other Palestinian people.
Mhm.
There's a difference between Jewish Americans that live in America and Israeli citizens that live in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
That have probably heard a bomb go off.
Yep.
At their local cafe shop. We're fortunate,
Yeah.
that we don't have that here in the U.S. But I do, and unless you have one more question for Steve,
Mhm.
I'd like to ask him one more thing.
Well, let me expand a little bit about what I was saying with that.
Mhm.
The left has created this followership
Right.
that just looks at things and listens without even analyzing what the heck are they following.
Right.
And I think we're seeing that through and through. We're seeing them utilizing these kids, putting ideology into their heads
Because it's
to make them
votes.
believe exactly, and
It's
it
votes.
helps them sway exactly where they want the political winds to go towards, and it's a total controls aspect of it.
Mhm.
So go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So Steve, I'm curious with your uh, role now as a senior fellow. My understanding, you're only suspended, but that's not indefinite. Is that correct?
Well, it was the case when I was suspended, but that was one of the first of many usurpations I suffered from the FBI, and ultimately culminated when I had the opportunity to become a fellow at Center for Renewing America because I was indefinitely and suspended and unpaid while this was going
Okay.
to be adjudicated over a
Right.
number of years. I asked for permission to have outside employment, and they rejected that. And at that time, my lawyer said that it was likely they would look to charge me with a crime if I accepted the position. So I chose to do that the
Oh.
day I testified. And then the FBI and Democrats and media all colluded to officially revoke my security clearance the day that I testified publicly at the Weaponization Committee.
Unbelievable.
And so obviously, no,
And we had a Department of
whistleblower law.
Energy
Yeah.
employee, actually appointee, who stole some luggage. I won't
Doesn't
go into
get
that
anything.
story.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story
But
right there.
the follow-on question, Steve, we have a new Speaker of the House now, Congressman Jim Jordan. He had kicked off the weaponization subcommittee. I'm just curious, do you see an end to this? There's a new election coming up, of course. We have one tomorrow, which is very important here locally, the 24 presidential election. What do you see in the future, say post 24? Do you see some of this coming back to what we like to call common sense practices? Do you see some of this politicization going away?
It only happens if people sort of recognize the unfortunate circumstances that we're in here and don't just say, I'm going to vote and then not pay attention for the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years. And
Right.
hopefully the person we install does a good job. I think that we've got ourselves into a mess, and then the first thing we have to do is look in the mirror and take some personal accountability and work at a local level. Because ultimately, we talked about our founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. They knew that the jobs that they were holding at the time of the origins of our country should not matter to us as much as something like a school board member does. That is going to directly impact your community. We have to wake up our neighbors. We have to make sure that we're fortifying our local communities, because if things go badly, at least on my street, in my community, in my county, if we're a bulwark against an out of control weaponized government, we can live as close to the American dream as is physically possible.
Mm.
Well, thank you.
No, that's completely true. I mean, we got to do our civic duty, and right now we're on the eve of elections, huge elections, and
Mhm.
proud to say that the Conservative Party is up in early voting. I think our last word was 8% up.
Overall in the county? Is that what the-
over on the state?
In the Virginia.
Over on the state.
Yeah, that's very good news.
So I don't think it falls far from the county
Mhm.
either. But I think a lot of parents, a lot of community members are kind of fed up and kind of seeing this division. And when I come in and I talk with a lot of Democrats, I do talk with a lot of moderates. Just had, lunch with more left Democrat, And even they are beginning to see that this is too much. This is too much pain, too much everything that's happening.
Right.
They see too much division. And I think as a community, instead of just falling back and saying, okay, well, it's not affecting me right now, and I don't want to deal with it because I know how bad it can be. We need community members to stand up and say, listen, this is our community. We're going to take it back.
Right.
This type of hate is not wanted here. This type of division is not wanted here. We want more common sense. We want more family traditions involved. And when I started looking at the breakdown of family traditions, and it goes into the control aspect. How can we control the next generation coming up?
Yeah.
It's to break down family traditions, separate them, have them fight against the norms of the family tradition, and question everything about that. We're seeing it. We're seeing questioning in religion. Religion's been taken out, and people want to question that, and we're seeing question in
You see it in training.
You see it.
In Fairfax County Public Schools. Last summer,
Yeah.
they were training teachers that they did not have to notify parents if the child wanted to use a different pronoun.
And which is
That first phase of
which is this
confusion.
school board is completely fighting against Glenn Youngkin's model policy that goes against that.
and that's why we are domestic terrorists, because we speak against that at a school board meeting.
well, it's separation because they believe that they know best for the kids, and that parents are the enemy towards
Right.
kids.
Right.
I mean, I was actually told on Twitter that when I said kids belong to their parents, that's their family, the person wrote, kids aren't property. And as you go through Twitter and different, Facebook and everything out there, you hear that narrative over and over again saying kids aren't property, kids aren't property, kids aren't property. And as if they could say, they could do as they want and see. And having that attitude, we're seeing what's happening in our society. We're seeing increase in violence from young teens. We're seeing looting. We're seeing pop-up riots. We're seeing disrespect is going out toward law enforcement from police. We're seeing and college students, obviously, they transitioned before.
Well,
So
we
we're
talked
seeing
in
it
the last podcast about George Soros and some of his super PACs. They're funneling into these left-wing movements, I guess, call them. They want to call them a revolution. But they aim to disrupt the school system. They aim to defund the police. That actually is a very specific goal of some of these PACs. We're seeing it, like you mentioned, with the crime locally. It goes a little bit beyond school board, but you're seeing crime and petty theft type activity on school grounds. As well.
We're seeing it through.
So it's going to be a sunny day tomorrow.
Tony, very much will.
And good conservatives, we're used to voting on one day. That's another part of this politicization. 45 days for voting, early voting, completely unheard of.
I have ideas on how we could,
But we can't make change without a vote, and we need that vote tomorrow. Everybody needs to come out. It's going to be sunny. Bring your kids. If you're a parent, I'm going to bring my kids and go vote. I wait until election day to vote, unless I'm overseas, with an absentee. But tomorrow we can really make a difference. We're going to start, bright and early, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get the signs up and have everything ready. Tony's going to be moving around the district in Providence, saying hello to everybody. So it's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great election day tomorrow. So I really encourage your vote for Tony Sabio.
And I think it's just not in Virginia. I think there's 7 other states that are actually having major votes. I think it's a big movement to see where the political winds are blowing towards across the nation. I think it's going to be good. I think there's a lot of common sense people out there that are sick and tired of what they're seeing. I mean, it's front and center. It's pretty blatant on a lot of things. But Steve, tell me this. Tell me, what can people do beyond just the election and going out to vote? What's your suggestion on how they can help out and become a voice?
Well, I think there's a few things to do. You just got to keep your own house in order. I always tell everyone the best thing they could do is make sure their child knows how to read and write in cursive, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
if they snap
That's
and the internet goes down, you need to know what the founding documents actually say. That's something that
right.
is so
Yeah.
small, but is actually going to have quite an impact. And I think you also have to instill in your children a love of education, a love of reading, a love of history, because if they don't hold on to the facts of our history, then when those things are taught back to them, and certain elements of it are omitted or left by the wayside, or certain elements are heightened over others, they're not really going to gain an appreciation for what it is to be an American. And I think you have to make a commitment at home, and you have to say, look, if in fact our country is involved in some sort of cold civil war from a political aspect, what are you willing to do to protect your children or your grandchildren from having to be engaged in a kinetic, hot civil war? I think most people would say, I'll be willing to do anything. Well, are you willing to be inconvenienced? Are you
Mhm.
willing
Right.
to feel a little bit uncomfortable? I think we all could commit to that, and really that sort of commitment. That, you might have to miss Thursday night football because there's a school board meeting to go to, or you might have to miss your fantasy football draft because little Johnny has a spelling test tomorrow and he really needs you to pay attention to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the small sacrifices that we can all make in our household to keep this great American experiment going.
What do you say, Jeff? What's your 2 words of
Oh, my 2 words, Steve. Thank you again. Again, to have you and Tony on the same show and having a conversation about this, and letting our viewers know the realities of the politicization that's going on at the very local
Mhm.
level, as local as the school board. And again, for our viewers, True Blue is the book that Steve has authored. You can Google it. It's I'm looking at Amazon right now. Looks like 7.5 stars, Steve. So your book's doing pretty good. But again, True Blue. Thank you again, Steve.
I
Thank
think
you
Thanks,
we
for
got
guys.
joining.
some questions here. We like to take questions here. So we'll take them all, and good and bad, and we just answer them.
First question is for Mr. Friend. Many anonymous trolls on social media platforms destroy reputations with impunity. What is the best way to handle them?
I don't respond to anonymous trolls. If you're not willing to put your name on something, then you're not really worth my time, consideration, or stress.
That's a good one.
That's perfect.
Question for Tony Sabio.
Okay, let's hear it.
According to a recent decision of the Fairfax County Public School Board, parents cannot stand to film other parents during the board meeting. Would you keep that prohibition?
I will allow parents to record anything they want. It's their meeting. And we got to understand, like, I went to these school board meetings and the parents are talking, and it's captured in the back of their head. That is the most disrespectful thing. Yeah, when the superintendent or anyone else comes up and talk from Fairfax County Public School, they put the camera right on their face. That's going to change. These school board meetings are for the parents.
Mhm.
And obviously there has to be some civil decorum. But when you start regulating parents in a sense to where if they want to record each other, let them record each other. I mean, you're taking a stance that the parents are all violent, which is a stance they take now. That's why they're saying, hey, we need to protect
Or
our kids.
disruptive.
Or disruptive. Yeah. Well, considering that these school board meetings, and Steve, I don't know how long your school board meetings go over there, but ours will start at 7 p.m. and end at 2 a.m.
Well, I was just going to ask you, how many photo ops do you plan to have?
None.
As a,
None. Listen, I will. Every meeting needs to be about an hour to an hour and a half max, and that's it. And we're going to switch it to the weekend and not right after work when they have a work day the next day. It's going to be on the weekend, and everyone can come. It's going to be, at a good time where people can attend. And it's going to be left to about an hour, hour and a half. And I want more parent participation as far as voicing their concerns.
I like the idea of the parent advisory.
Yeah. So
Cool.
those are the things.
I have a question for Mr. Hoffman. I am sure you're aware of the case of FCPS board member Melanie Marin, who harassed a respectable clerk of the board just because she displayed the flags of the United States in her office. What would be your advice to the new members of the board with respect to showing our love and respect for our nation's symbol?
Follow Virginia code and follow the U.S. Constitution, and you will do that after you take the oath.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, I have the
After
flag
you're,
right
you're
there.
elected, you will take the oath. We've taken the oath a few times.
Yep.
Myself, military, government service for a while. It shouldn't even be a question if there should be a Pledge of Allegiance.
No.
In a school. I'm absolutely respectful for culture and other ethnicities, but this is America.
Yeah.
And if you think that you can take away the U.S. flag,
Yeah.
and allow somebody maybe to be silent,
Mhm.
then I mean that's a part of being American, is having respect for the glory and the representative,
Yep.
republic that we live in. And I just, we've seen it in the NFL games,
Mhm.
with some of the kneeling. My opinion, I know a lot of people have opinions. I could never imagine that.
Well,
I could never imagine not having a flag in a classroom and, having our kids subjected to the values of what America is.
Well, they lose sight on what that flag embodies every single person, every single other flag. That's why in the military,
Mhm.
when you do the national anthem,
Yeah.
all the other flags are lowered. The American flag is always higher than any other flag in the military. It
Right.
embodies everything. And so when you start separating that and saying, that flag does not embody me. No, it does. In this country, that flag represents
Well, the LGBT
everything.
flag certainly doesn't belong next to the American flag.
what?
The LGBT flag can hang proudly
Yeah,
on somebody's house.
yeah.
I was in Maine, I guess, for vacation last summer. You see it a lot. Great. People should be proud. I have a lot of gay friends,
Yeah.
family members, and colleagues, and I'm proud.
Yeah.
Right. Of how much they've achieved, actually, since Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And his opposition to was it that the Briggs Initiative.
Yeah.
That allowed gay teachers to be in schools.
Yeah.
And to have that opportunity. I think it's phenomenal to see all that progress, but don't overextend that. Don't make it so hypersensitive that that's the only focus in the classrooms. And this right here is a true sign of that hypersensitization of LGBT in our classrooms. Like you said, Steve, math, reading, science. Add a little bit of cursive writing and some phonics, and I think we've got a pretty good blend of academic achievement and goals for our kids.
I
Anymore?
have
Have you had
another
another?
question for Mr. Friend. If you have the opportunity to make a recommendation to change school curriculum, what would you recommend? Would you strengthen civics?
Absolutely, I would enhance the civics and just a basic, how a bill becomes a bill. It's the Schoolhouse Rock version. I've spoken to a lot of
I
groups,
remember
and
that. I love
there's-
that cartoon.
there's just a not that knowledge is not common anymore.
We have a copy
I
of
would
that.
also I would push very hard on vocational training as well. I think that to bring back the auto shop, auto repair, home ec, personal finance. We touched on this briefly. People are not able to come forward as whistleblowers because they're financially beholden to their job. Now, look, I'll push back on that and say, look, your oath of office should supersede that. You don't enter into public service to get rich. You are compromised if that is weighing in on in the back of your mind. But nevertheless, that wouldn't be an issue if people could manage to keep themselves out of debt and learn to balance a checkbook. So I think that those are basic life skills that I would push really hard to bring into curriculum.
No, and I agree. Any more questions?
No.
Yeah, why don't we have a national POW month?
We should have a lot of stuff. I'll tell you that.
No, I mean, I'm serious, right? This is part of civics. That's the only reason I bring that up, Steve. We don't want to talk about prisoners of war,
Mhm.
but there still are prisoners of war today, as we speak. and there's no recognition. There's Veterans Day for those that served, but we have a whole month for all these different movements and cultural, sensitive areas, including Pride Month. But we don't even have a POW week.
No, we don't. And I tell you what, we have a lot of people that served our country in Afghanistan that were promised certain things and were left there. And that really hits home to a lot of veterans that now they are prisoners of war,
Right.
with the Taliban. And
Yeah.
we don't look at it like that. They served their country with the promise of being United States citizens.
Oh, and I just saw a video today of Afghanistan with the vacuum that happened with the pullout.
Yeah.
There was a 50-year-old Afghan gentleman,
Mhm.
not even a monster.
Mhm.
They categorized it as taking receipt of his 12-year-old wife.
Yes.
And it was obviously it wasn't a peaceful,
Yeah.
handoff, and it was just disgusting.
You
But
know,
it just shows you, what happened. I don't want to get into the administration policies. This isn't about a presidential
No,
debate.
no.
This is about you winning an election tomorrow.
It's myself winning election and a bunch of other candidates are going to win
But I
election.
thought the video was just disgusting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, that wraps it up. We finished our questions out, and this election is very important. And we're talking about, the state of our country, the state of our communities, and it starts with us. And you heard some good advice. You heard great stories of people self-sacrificing their livelihood for the right thing. And, sometimes we have to dig in deep and do that sacrifice. Our country has given us so much, and we are so blessed compared to what I've seen across the world. And we take that for granted as Americans. And what we need to do as Americans is say, hey, listen, if I want a future for my kids, if I want this great nation that gave me so much, that gave the world so much, to be able to prosper, to grow, then maybe I need to sacrifice myself on certain things. And we're not seeing that enough. I know there's a movement out there, but we need more. We need your support, the ones that are actually going out there day in and day out that are fighting a good fight. We're not saying for you to come out on the front line, but we need your support. I can tell you this for myself, when I hear a good comment saying thank you for everything you're doing, it gives me boost for the next day or two. And so I'm sure Steve, the same thing with him. When he hears comments coming back saying thank you for what you're sacrificing for our country, it gives him the resolve to keep going. And so if you are not that type of person to take the front line and be a voice that support those voices, don't hang out in the back. The left has been phenomenal doing that, and we need to do the same. So I thank you. November 7th, important election. Across our nation, 7 different states are having local elections and state elections. Go out there, vote, 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 and grab other people. If you have a couple buddies that don't want to vote and typically don't, just tell them, please, just vote for me. Like, do me a favor and come along with me. We have to do that. I'll see you in Fairfax County. I'll see you out tomorrow. I'll be walking around, shaking hands, doing a political thing. And I'd like to thank my guest, my co-host, Jeff, for everything he's been doing. Steve, for your phenomenal story and everything you're going through for our country. It's commendable.
And the book that he's written about it, True Blue.
Yes, everyone.
And maybe post 24, a reinstated special agent.
Exactly.
Stephen Friend.
Buy the book. It's a phenomenal book. It's on Amazon for how much? $19.99 or what is it?
I don't have to.
It keeps fluctuating around. So I think last time it was like about $22.
$22.
Yeah,
Guys, listen, that's the cost of a pizza, okay? And you're going to get more information than eating a pizza during the NFL game. So just put in context. There's a lot of books out. We need good books like this, good stories. We need good the word of good people to be out there to grow. And like I said, thank you everyone for listening in. And I hope this helped you. And if you have any further comments, please feel free to contact our website, Sabio, the number 4, Fairfax.com, or if we're at the polling stations, stop on over and say hi to me, and we could talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.